Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sangeeta Saxena getting you live from the day 2 of MRO, Association of India's flagship event, Aero MRO 2022. And we have with us somebody who's going to talk about something very new in the system, which is the drone applicability in this country, an MRO for drones and whatnot, And we have with us the CEO of Jatayu Unmanned Systems, Captain Aman Johri. Welcome, Aman, to our chat show. What is it like to be with a drone MRO?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Drone in itself has been a new concept for many people, and MROs has been sort of unheard, over its journey over the last 75 odd years of this young country. Both industries are considered as sunshine sectors by none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of the country. And he believes that, and so does everyone who is involved in aviation, that both have the capability of putting India right on the global map, of making India the center for not only innovation, but also manufacturing, development, rapid growth, rapid acceleration, and thereby with MROs being a backup and support for everything that happens in the rest of the world. To give you a little bit of perspective, typically MROs in itself in India have been just a few of companies, let's say less than 10 companies in total when we started. And today we are having all our supply chain partners and the auxiliary industries around who support us in building. And drones are similar to this. When we start with drones, we think of OEMs who build small photography equipment. But drones are so much more than that. Drones are not just equipment that you can fly for 10 minutes and take cool shots from, of a family on a vacation or a wedding or a festival procession. Drones can be used for agriculture activities. They can be used for inspection, mapping. They can be used to solve court cases. Quite often you see in Indian high courts, they use drone technology to resolve the land dispute issues. They can be used in defense. They help ease the pressure on the man on the front line. And not just that, drones have the capability of changing a country's economy, which is why a lot of developing nations, especially in the SAARC region and the MENA region, have focused on drones as one of the focused industries, and there are specific ministers dealing with those problems and issues. So likewise, I believe personally that drone MROs as a collaboration and amalgamation is going to be the next step. Some very serious MRO players in India who've invested billions of dollars in the past in developing commercial aircraft MRO have to, I wouldn't say that they will or they fancy, I'm saying they have to start thinking about building drone MRO capability also. We are a DGCA CR 145 and FAA 145 facility, which means we anyway do commercial aircrafts. We operate at the highest aviation standard possible. Now when we include drones, we have to change our mindset and thinking into developing something that is very innovative. It's next gen, and it's driven by the youth, it's driven by youngsters, and that's kind of the whole kick we get out of not just MROs but also drone industry as a whole.
Yes, absolutely. What you say, Aman, is right, but then you say it is imperative. But with drones, what happens is we normally feel, or when I say we, I mean the common man, feels that, if the drone doesn't work, fine, we can get another one. Now, where does that leave a requirement for a MRO for drones?
Yes, ma'am, and that is a completely valid question. In fact, it is pretty relevant in the civil domain consumption also in drones, where drones are low value assets. They mostly have line replaceable components, so all you need to do is maintain an inventory and stock of replaceable units that with a license and with an approval you can get a certificate of change for. But the MROs have to specifically focus on HAIL and MAIL class, which is high altitude long endurance and medium altitude long endurance UAVs. India today has 550 plus HAIL MAIL drones that include the Rustams made by DRDO indigenously. You've got the Herons and Searchers made by Israel Aerospace Industries, and India is planning to induct another 3,000 HAIL and MAIL class UAVs in the next 2 years. So naturally the scope and size of the market is big. I would say it's way bigger than the commercial MRO market size also. Simply focusing on military, paramilitary and certain civil consumption drones. Now a typical question would be, where would you need a HAIL class drone in the civil world? Where would you require such a big drone which requires a runway to take off? Very simply, and I'd like to take this cue from the UAE's Sheikh Al Nahyan, who last year at the climate summit in Paris said that UAE is committed in reducing its global temperatures of the entire country by 10 degrees in the next 5 years. which is a very big statement to make, especially for a country that is a full desert. And the reason they're going to achieve that is by cloud seeding, by afforestation, by creating artificial rainfalls, by increasing the time period of their monsoons. And they don't nearly have the number of aircrafts, pilots, or maintenance schools or training schools to meet that target. So how do they meet that target? And that target is through drones. Drones are not only 10 times cheaper than buying a civil commercial aircraft and flying it minus a pilot. Drones also help you get more accuracy and efficiency up in the air. Because you remove human out of the loop, you're adding a computer, which means the calculations are more precise. There is less scope for human error, less scope for fatigue, and the computer doesn't get tired. Which is the exactly the kind of thought process a country needs to meet its targets. And of course, climate change, meeting your sustainable development goals, all of these are areas where drones can really help a country grow. So in that case, of course, MROs become an auxiliary segment, but an important backbone of the drone industry, which is why we need MROs in this space.
Also, when it comes to military MROs and drones in the military sector, is that an exercise which has begun, or are you still trying to foray into it?
We're a 7-8-year-old startup. We've been building drones for defense for a long time. But all the procurement of drones, I would say, dare say 99% of the procurement of drones in the military in India has been at a command level, which means the limited budget out of the capital expenditure that the army is able to spend. They spend maybe just about 10% of it in procuring drones. The rest 90% goes in procuring next generation equipment that they need just to survive. But now the mindset has changed. The Indian Army has come out with 12 RFPs in the last 2 weeks for procurement of upward of 65,000 drones totally just in the next 6 months. So the scope and scale for startups to get into this space is massive. Of course, to meet that criteria and meet those requirements, meet the GRs that typically the army and the military provide, you need some experience for a company. You need to be able to build and crash enough drones to be there. You can't make omelets without breaking a few eggs. So to reach that space, there is a bit of a learning curve required. But the Indian scenario is looking very, very strong. In fact, if the 6-month procedure, the emergency procurement goes through, India will make history in being the first country to procure the largest amount of indigenous drones. And Make in India is a very strong concept. In fact, you would see that in all the RFPs that the military has formally come out, not one single one of them can allow an independent foreign entity to enter. You either need a transfer of technology or you need a make-to category, which means you build in India and you design in India. And that's the encouragement that we all have.
Also, when you say Indian Army, do you also mean the Air Force and the Navy, or it's just the Indian Army with 65,000?
No, ma'am. This is just the Indian Army with about 60 to 65,000 drones. The Air Force and Navy have a completely different requirement of their own, which has not even come out in the public yet. But very soon, in the next 3-4 months, you will see that the Air Force starts procuring it proactively as well. The Air Force has their own programs. It's called the Meher Baba Prize. We were one of the few lucky ones to be finalists in the Meher Baba Prize in the phase 1. And in phase 2, they're looking at a swarm of 300 drones. So 600, I mean, it's going to be a massive capability that is required just for the Air Force. And Navy is yet to be seen, but I'm pretty sure Navy will be as close as Army and Air Force are.
Also, when we talk of security, we also talk of paramilitary forces. Is there a requisition from them also? Because for them also, drone was a very major requirement.
Yes, ma'am. Other than the Indian Army, the paramilitary in India is the second largest consumer of civil, procured and civil indigenized drones. The NSG, for example, procures anywhere between 100 and 200 drones a year. They're all at command levels, they're all for their personal consumptions in units, and they're not really national tenders, but that will change too. State polices of different polices, especially states which have the budget to procure, for example, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, there's Delhi, although Delhi comes under the union government, but still, individually they procure anywhere between 100 and 200 drones a year, which is a very limited size right now, but going forward, at least till 2025, you will see these tenders coming out in a big way. And all that, the defense side is trying to prove is that India really has the capability to produce. We know that the tech is good. We know that the tech really beats all the competitions worldwide. While we as an Indian startup compete with our Israeli and German counterparts, we're able to beat them one-on-one. There's never a problem with that. The problem is always production. The problem is supply chain. And the one thing that the Ukraine war has taught us as Indians is to be self-reliant. If we start depending on other countries for our defense tech, then we're going to be left with a begging bowl. And that's the reason this push has been at such an opportune time right after Def Expo. And I'm pretty sure right before Aero India, you will see some big news about companies like us getting into this space.
And but that is really nice to hear actually. Now with all this happening and the requisition being so high, tell me what is the plan you have for training of operations and training of maintenance?
So I'm a DGC approved instructor myself, one of the very few in India, just specifically on drones, maintenance and engineering and piloting. We are an RPTO, which is a remote pilot training organization. We're also one of the few RPTOs that are non-aviation schools who have gotten an approval independently as a company. And the reason we've gone into this is because we know that India will require upwards of 5 lakh pilots in the next 3 years. And that is an official requirement by, stated by the ministry. This is just for surveys and civil consumption. In defense, you have something called the Agniveer scheme, which is coming up. And the first primary task of any Agniveer, whether in the Army, Navy or the Air Force, has to handle drones, which means you will need that amount of training to percolate in the deep into the defense as well. So individually, you have on a civil side, you have upwards of 3 or 4 lakh pilots or 5 lakh pilots that you have to create. There are 12 RPTOs in India, and total we've been able to just create about 1,500 pilots in the last 6 months alone. So you can see that the curve is going in the positive direction. It's a very steep curve, and you will see more than 30 RPTOs in the next 8 or 9 months in India, operating independently in their own regions and doing really well. That comes on the pilot side of how to teach someone how to fly. On the AME side, we are talking to institutes specifically for aircraft maintenance to include programs with drones, to teach them to generate some awareness, because it's a young man's game. You need to understand tech. And like I've said in the panel in the past also, that every 6 months the technology evolves 10 times. You sleep on it and you wake up the next day and it's a new technology altogether. Every part that you have, every inventory you have is either obsolete or doesn't work anymore. So the maintenance organizations need to keep up with that pace, which means the training needs to keep up with that pace. For example, if you need a recurrency for an AME of 1 year, for drones that will be 3 months. So every 3 months this person has to go 1 or 2 days of recurrent training to get updated with the systems. And a lot of it is software oriented, which means the language of the future is not English or French, it's going to be Python, that's for sure. And all of that needs to happen in India.
Wonderful. I think, Aman, that was great speaking with you. A growing field and a growing agenda, and also growing information for us. So I'm just hoping that the next time we meet, we'll have more to discuss, more news from your end coming up. And I'm sure it will be wonderful to see the drone industry flourishing both in civil and military requirements. Thank you very much for being on our chat.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.